Hello and welcome to Rise Unwind. My name is Dan. You know, each and every week I try to talk to people from across the country about things you could do in your neighborhood. And on this week's show, we got this.
Most of them have less than $5,000 held within crypto.
And the best version of moviegoing possible.
All of that and more right here in Rise Unwind. So what's really going on in the markets right now, and how much should we be paying attention? From IPOs to interest rates, the launch of NYSE Texas, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So joining us today is Michael Reinking, CFA and Senior Market Strategist at the New York Stock Exchange. He's here to help break down the latest trends and what they can mean for the rest of 2025. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me back on.
All right, so let's start with the big picture. How would you describe the current economic outlook, especially with ongoing uncertainty and global tensions, while still trying to make the headlines?
Yes, so I think you need to level set and just kind of understand where we were coming into this year, right? We had equity markets that have been very strong for back-to-back years. The economy was in a pretty good place. We were seeing a little bit of moderation in economic activity, and this disinflationary process was playing out. The introduction of kind of the protectionist policies, from the administration, which were much more aggressive, I think, than markets had, anticipated, did introduce, not only some uncertainty, but quite a bit of volatility, kind of into financial markets during the first quarter. Now, we've seen, kind of the tone around those negotiations has softened, kind of quite a bit, right? And we're now hoping to kind of have a resolution, in the next couple of weeks. What that'll do is allow businesses, to kind of stop sitting on their hands, to potentially kind of, start investing again, kind of start, hiring people again. And then also from a financial market perspective, will allow the agenda or the administration to start to focus on that pro-growth, deregulatory agenda, which markets were looking for to start this year, and it could potentially set us up for a strong, end of 2025.
And we've also seen a few notable IPOs recently. What's the story behind those, and are there more companies starting to feel confident about going public?
Yes, absolutely, right. So we did start to, finally see the green shoots of the IPO market kind of at the end of last year. Now, once again, that volatility in Q1 did seem to slow the pipeline a little bit, but as volatility has kind of subsided and markets have rebounded, we're starting to see more companies, coming public. We've had, kind of quite a few high-profile companies, most recently Circle and Voyager here at the New York Stock Exchange. And what we're seeing is that there's very strong demand, right? So those companies have been able to kind of upsize their deals. They're pricing above the top end of the range, allowing them to raise more capital to reinvest back into their businesses. And we're also seeing, very strong demand in the secondary market, right? And what that does is going to really continue to add to the momentum in that pipeline, kind of as we head into Q4.
And all eyes are on the Fed. How are markets reacting ahead of this next decision, and what signals should people be watching out for?
Yeah, so we have a Federal Reserve rate decision later today. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to keep rates unchanged. One of the interesting things is that we'll see an update to the summary of economic projections for the first time since March, right? And so if you think back to that, that was really before we saw the full introduction of kind of tariff policy coming from Washington, right? So I would think we could see a negative revision to GDP estimates, maybe a slight uptick in unemployment estimates and inflation, but I think markets will, especially at that 2 o'clock time frame, focus on where the dots are. So the dots show where the 19 members of the FOMC committee believe rates will be at the end of this year, next, and the following, right? And in that March time period, the committee was very split between 1 and 2. So it only takes a couple people to move down to one rate cut, which could kind of cause a little bit of volatility during during that window between the statement and Chair Powell's press conference. However, I think his tone will be a little bit more dovish, right? He's going to continue to want to maintain some optionality, but he's going to point to the resilience in the economy, the recent inflation data, kind of coming in better than expected, and I think he could start to kind of, with some, quite a few qualifiers, start to set the table, for potential rate cuts, kind of coming in the fall, should the data continue to cooperate. The one thing that does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into that inflation conversation is the the increased tensions in the Middle East, kind of pushing oil markets higher.
And as we start looking towards the second half of the year, what's driving the markets right now, and how do you think things are shaping up overall?
Yeah, so look, I think we've been kind of caught in a little bit of this period of a policy fog, right, where we've seen a little bit of moderation of economic activity after there was some pull forward of demand, kind of in Q1, right? But, kind of that once again kind of does set us up for once we have a resolution and, kind of a better understanding of what policy is going to look like, and then, the tax policy, put in place, by Congress as they're working through the big, beautiful bill, kind of in the July timeframe, right? What that does is allow companies to start reinvesting. We could potentially start to see kind of earnings estimates and economic data, to begin to pick up, some momentum. And the administration is going to shift its focus, kind of away from trade policy, more towards that pro-growth, deregulatory environment as we head into midterms, right? So, that all sets up for a potentially positive backdrop, kind of heading into the end of this year.
And switching gears a little bit, so what inspired the creation of the NYSE Texas?
Yeah, so this has been, kind of a really exciting development for the New York Stock Exchange, right? NYSE Texas is the first exchange incorporated, in the state of Texas. And when you think of the New York Stock Exchange, we have very deep roots and relationships, in the Lone Star State already. It's the state with the most NYSE listed companies in the country, and over 200 companies employing well over 3 million people and nearly $4 trillion of market capitalization. And when you think about, kind of the Texas economy, the growth in the economy, and the population, it's becoming kind of much more important, from an overall perspective for the United States. It's become a hub for, not only energy, but technology and financial markets. And much of that is a testament, to the pro-growth agenda and the pro-business jurisdiction that's been set up by Governor Abbott, right? And he's talked about wanting to have a local capital markets ecosystem, and NYSE Texas, is the first building block in that.
And I know NYSE Texas is fully electronic, but will there be still some sort of like physical presence in Dallas?
Yeah, so the market is an electronic market, but that is located in Dallas. We'll also have a headquarters there, right? That allows our listed companies, to dual list, show their support for that pro-business jurisdiction, right? And, and also kind of take advantage of our best-in-class trading technology.
And what kind of business opportunities do you think NYSE Texas could create, not just for companies in Texas, but maybe nationally or even globally?
Right. So, when we think of the New York Stock Exchange, kind of one of the kind of the real value propositions of being kind of listed here is being part of our great NYSE listed community of companies, right? And those relationships that you build, right, help kind of help drive business investment and business partnership, right? And NYSE Texas allows those companies to also show their support for that pro-business jurisdiction, kind of in the state of Texas, and potentially take advantage of any incentives that are offered for companies that are listed there.
Michael Reinking, thanks for joining us this morning. Where can we go for more information about any of this?
Thanks. So we publish our market commentary daily on NYSE.com, once in the pre-market, once during the middle of the day. I also host a weekly podcast which comes out every Friday. It's under the Inside the Ice House podcast feed. It's called Market Storylines. It's about 5 to 10 minutes. We try to keep it pretty bite-sized in terms of talking about what's happening that week and a quick look ahead to the following.
Thanks for joining us this morning, Michael.
And thanks for having me. I'll talk to you again soon.
June is Internet Safety Month, and whether you're a skeptic or just crypto curious, now it's time to understand what it really is and how to avoid getting scammed. Ali Tager from the National Cryptocurrency Association is here to help us make a little more sense of it all, from new research to smart habits to keep your money safe. Let's welcome her to the show. Welcome, Ali. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me today.
Okay, first off, for people that are like a little fuzzy on the basics, how does crypto actually work?
Yeah, of course. At its core, crypto is math, not magic. It is a technology. It is basically a digital asset that you can send, save, or use. There is no middleman to control it, so it's completely up to you how you use it, and it's really important that you go ahead and keep it safe and secure. With crypto, transactions are final and cannot be reversed, and so you really want to go the extra mile to make sure that you are double-checking everything, verifying the sources, is and the details before you do anything with cryptocurrency. But you do have a way to keep it safe, and that is your private key. So with crypto, you have a public key that is your wallet address, sort of like your email. And that's what you share with other people so you can send and receive crypto. But then your private key is really like your bank account PIN number. You never want to share that with anybody. It's your private password. And so I'm going to talk to you today about how you keep it safe and how we spot some common scams that unfortunately are pervasive on every corner of the internet.
And you guys just released a new study on crypto users. What are some of the most surprising things that you found?
Yeah, of course. We did the largest ever survey of crypto holders in America and actually heard from 10,000 US adults who are already using crypto today to do everything from shopping for goods and services to donating to nonprofits to running their businesses. And what was really surprising to us, I think a lot of us have heard that kind of quote unquote crypto bro stereotype, right? You think of a young, wealthy finance or tech person in New York or San Francisco. But what we've actually found is that crypto holders are much more diverse and come from all walks of life. They're spread pretty evenly across the entire country, from the Midwest to the coast to the South and beyond. And they are not just young people. The more crypto holders are actually over 55 than under 25, proving that any generation can embrace this technology. And they're not just bros. Actually, a third of crypto holders are women. And many do not belong to higher income brackets. You know, a lot of crypto holders start small with their investments. A lot of them make less than $75K a year, and most of them have less than $5,000 held within crypto. We're also seeing a lot of variation in terms of employment, where crypto holders are working. You know, it's not just the finance and tech people of the world. Actually, just as many crypto holders work in construction. But most importantly, 75% of crypto holders are seeing really positive benefits in their day-to-day lives. They're seeing investment gains, they're seeing sense of personal achievement, and they're learning and growing and having fun and excitement just from being part of a new and innovative field.
And online scams are pretty much everywhere. What are some of the big red flags that people should be looking out for?
Totally. You know, the scams we see with crypto are the same scams you see with online banking or even online dating. You might have a scammer pretend to be a new friend or romantic interest to earn your trust over time before they start to ask you to send them money or crypto. You might get a phishing email or text asking you to click a link or verify some information. And you also see a lot of urgency and pressure tactics. You know, you need to do this right away or something bad will happen. Real financial opportunities take time, and we want to make sure that you are doing your research, slowing down, and really verifying every transaction, because since there is no middleman with crypto, transactions are final and can't be reversed. So our golden rule of thumb is if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And that means that no, a celebrity is probably not messaging you, asking you to send them a bit of your crypto before they send you a lot more. We see fake giveaways and impersonations online as well. So it's really important to not trust anyone you haven't met.
Okay. All right. What are some easy things people could do right now to protect themselves pretty much financially online?
Exactly. Yeah. Security should always be top of mind. You always want to make sure you're practicing smart online habits. So you never want to take financial advice from someone you haven't met. You never want to share your private key, which is like your PIN or password, with anybody. And you actually want to write it down on a piece of paper with a pen and store that physical backup in a safe location, like a safety deposit box. You never want to click on random links in emails, social media posts, or texts, and pay really close attention to the details. You know, what is the URL link where this website is? What is the sender address of the email? Are there any typos or weird spelling and grammar errors that can tip you off to something being a little bit fishy and not legit?
And for anyone that's curious but still cautious, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, go to our website, the National Cryptocurrency Association. It's nca.org. And we've got lots of great resources and explainers on who's using crypto, how and why, but also what it is, how it works, and most importantly, how to keep it safe.
Allie, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
Most people don't realize skin cancer is actually the most common form of cancer. And for many older adults, it could be a scary diagnosis. Now there's concern that access to non-surgical treatment some seniors rely on might be changing. We're joined by Matthew Bassett, a longtime healthcare policy expert, and Dr. Kenneth Melanie, a physician with decades of experience, to help explain what this could mean for patients. Let's welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
All right, what's the treatments we're talking about here, and how is it helping patients with skin cancer?
So the treatment we're talking about is called image-guided superficial radiation therapy. And what it does is it takes a therapeutic, which is superficial radiation therapy, that's been in existence for over 100 years, used by dermatologists to treat skin lesions. And it's pretty effective on its own, but they've added another component to it. So they use what's called a high-resolution dermal ultrasound to sort of look at the lesion. And normally you can see lesions on the surface of your skin, but you can't see down deeper. With the ultrasound, you can actually do a three-dimensional picture of the lesion and see how well it's responding to treatment, and then make adjustments in that treatment if necessary. And it's taken SRT, or superficial radiation therapy, to a new dimension. And it's increased the cure rates by anywhere from 5 to 10%, making it comparable to Mohs surgery, which is the common therapy that's used today.
So what's changing in how Medicare may cover this, and why are some folks worried?
All right, so for the past 9 years since this has been introduced to the marketplace, Medicare has been paying for the therapy. Now suddenly Medicare is putting out two new policies, one regarding the coverage and the other regarding coding and payment. And if they enact any one of these two policies, it's going to basically make IGSRT, or image-guided superficial radiation therapy, non-existent in the marketplace. It's going to take it, limit the access because of what impact it will have both financially to people who are using it. And that's going to be devastating. That's going to be really devastating for the senior marketplace, because most skin cancers are in people over the age of 65. And there's a subgroup of people within that group who have diabetes, who have are on anticoagulants or blood thinners, who tend to form keloids or scars when they're cut, and also people who just don't want to have surgery. And people who have lesions that aren't accessible to surgery, like around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears. And so if you take away this alternative, which is the most effective and most widely used alternative to Mohs, they really have to then resort back to the common things that have been used historically, which is surgery, which is risky, higher cost or less effective therapies like creams, which aren't very good, or just no therapy at all. And getting no therapy at all is very dangerous, especially for people who have squamous cell cancer, which can be lethal. So these policies, if they're enacted, are going to be very detrimental to the Medicare population, and it just doesn't make sense after 9 years with high success rates, no adverse outcomes, and costs that are relatively the same, if not cheaper, than what's currently out there to do this.
And from a patient's point of view, how could this impact their ability to choose the care that works best for them?
It impacts their care dramatically, because it limits the most effective and the most widely used alternative to surgery. Most people end up getting a surgical excision of some type, and most get Mohs surgery. There really was no alternative until 9 years ago when this was introduced to the marketplace. And now you're going to take this away, and you're going to be back to where we were 9 years ago. You're thwarting innovation.
And do you think seniors will still have enough access to different treatment options if this does go through?
No, there is great concern that they will not. When you consider that 120,000 seniors since 2016 have had their skin cancer cured by IGSRT, it makes absolutely no sense to remove this as a treatment option for patients. There is no cost savings to the Medicare program. In fact, a large study that was released this week showed that the costs will actually increase to the tune of between $1 billion and $2.5 billion over a 10-year period. So there are no cost savings. There is no clinical reason to take away something that seniors have enjoyed. All seniors on traditional Medicare today have access to IGSRT. But if these proposed changes go through, that could change as soon as the end of this month for millions of seniors.
All right, so where can our viewers go to learn more, or maybe even ask questions?
Well, we would invite everyone to go to patientsact.org, patientsact.org. There you can see which insurers are proposing these cuts. You can email during their open comment period and let them know this is not a direction you'd like to see them go. You can also email the White House, HHS, CMS, and their elected member of Congress, because there is a groundswell of support to end this policy before it begins. It makes no sense that 25,000 Americans that are currently in treatment today would have to worry if it would be covered next month.
Do you ever worry about how prepared your child's daycare is for a food allergy emergency? Severe allergic reactions can happen without warning, even in kids who have never been diagnosed. Dr. Alice Hoyt is a board-certified allergist and part of a national movement working to make early daycare centers safer. She's here with practical tips to help centers and parents stay ready for the unexpected. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hoyt. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, can you tell us what the Early Childhood Anaphylaxis Collaborative is and why this work is so urgent for daycare providers and families?
Absolutely. I'm super excited to partner with Kaleo in bringing this collaborative really to the forefront. What it is a group of individuals and other organizations who have been working in this anaphylaxis preparedness space for years and collaborating with healthcare providers, with early childcare professionals, with families to help early childcare centers be prepared to prevent severe allergic reactions, but also to manage them should and when they occur. As you mentioned, it's relatively common. 5 to 10% of kiddos in this age have a food allergy, and they are at risk of having a severe anaphylactic episode.
And what exactly is undesignated epinephrine, and why does it matter that centers have it on hand?
Anaphylaxis is the severe life-threatening reaction, and it's treated with epinephrine. Undesignated epinephrine is actually epinephrine that's not prescribed to an individual. It's actually prescribed to the childcare center or to the school, to an entity, to be used in case of an emergency, in case a child doesn't have their epinephrine, or in the case of about a third of kids in this age, they've never had an allergic reaction before, so they don't have a medication prescribed to them. That's where undesignated epinephrine can come in. And as long as the early child care center staff are trained to recognize and respond to that reaction and use that device, that epinephrine can be life-changing, life-saving.
So what should a solid anaphylaxis response plan include, especially for facilities caring for very young kids?
Yes. So your anaphylaxis response plan really should have two parts to it. The first part needs to be all about education, making sure that your early childcare professionals are trained on how to prevent and recognize and, of course, respond to that allergy emergency. And in our little ones, sometimes, they can't always raise their hand and say, "Excuse me, I'm having an allergic reaction." So we have to teach the early childcare professionals to really be mindful of that sudden change in behavior when a kiddo goes from feeling great to not feeling well and then starts vomiting, having hives, trouble breathing. Those are the things to really be looking for in these kiddos. So an anaphylaxis response plan has to include that education. And then the second part is, okay, how does the center actually respond? Are there a drill situation that goes in place where we're teaching the centers to respond, actually to get to that child with the emergency medication? It's so important not just to have the knowledge, but to have the actual plan or protocol in place so the undesignated epi can be used if needed.
So how are you guys helping centers take action? What kind of tools or support do they get by joining this collaborative?
It's really amazing. You go online, you sign up, put in your email, and you're immediately emailed these different links to these really wonderful organizations that just truly have a heart to serve early childcare centers to help them be prepared to prevent any child from being in a dangerous situation. Everything from educational posters to online courses to pathways to actually how to obtain that undesignated epinephrine. I love the collaborative because it's putting all of that into one nice place for the centers.
All right, for any childcare professional or parent that wants to learn more, where's the best place to start?
ECAcollaborative.com. And exactly as you said, childcare professional, family, healthcare professional, this is the place to start, the place to go to get this great information.
Dr. Hoyt, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
There's nothing quite like a big summer blockbuster, especially when the sound shakes your seat and the screen pulls you right into the action. From superheroes to dinosaurs to Formula One thrill rides, this year's movie lineup is packed with epic stories, and where you see them absolutely matters. So joining us from Dolby Laboratories, high-tech cinema in San Francisco, is Jed Harmson, a cinema sight and sound expert who knows how to turn a trip to the movies into a full-on experience. Welcome to the show, Jed. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, you're joining us from a pretty iconic location. Can you give us like a quick peek of where you are and what makes it special for movie lovers out there?
Yeah, so to give you a quick peek, I'm actually sitting in what is our largest of over 100 labs here at our headquarters here at Dolby in San Francisco. It's what we call the Dolby Cinema. which not only serves as our largest lab, but is actually what we view as our ultimate movie-going experience and combines the three key elements for us that deliver an incredible, unforgettable movie-going experience. One is incredible sight technology that we call Dolby Vision. The second is our latest immersive audio technology that we call Dolby Atmos. And last is an auditorium-inspired design that really allows for optimal engagement and sight lines and viewing from every seat in the house. So that's a little flavor of where I'm coming from and where I'm sat in.
And we all know story is important, and every filmmaking set I've been on, they put a lot of pressure and stress on that. But there's one thing that I always point out is the sound and the visuals. But sound, how does that really impact the way we experience a film, pretty much even at the end?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, both sight and sound are so instrumental to the filmmaking process and how consumers engage in the arts and in film in particular. I mean, to me, in the simplest explanation is our eyes and ears are the predominant ways through which we engage in these stories, right? So yes, it is about storytelling, but the audio visuals are storytelling mechanisms in and of themselves that allow filmmakers to transform their film from something you're simply watching to something to be immersed in, to be a part of. And when you're able to provide the greatest version of that sight and sound, which obviously for us is in the form of Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, that is what creates a level of engagement for film fans that can't be replicated elsewhere and just makes the enjoyment in the arts and entertainment that much more visceral.
And this summer is looking pretty stacked for its lineup. What kind of movies are on the way, and what makes this season stand out pretty much for you guys?
Yeah, as you said, it's a pretty impressive slate. I mean, we just had 28 Years Later and Elio. We have Jurassic World from Gareth Edwards. I'm really excited to see what he does with that franchise, given he directed Rogue One, which happens to be one of my favorite Star Wars films. We have Joe Kosinski's F1, which hopefully a lot of folks have, saw his last little movie called Top Gun Maverick. We have The Man of Steel, Superman coming out from James Gunn. We have Fantastic Four. I mean, I could go on, but it's particularly exciting. And for us at Dolby, what we get excited about is being able to broaden our Dolby Cinema experience to more and more moviegoers and letting them engage in the best version of moviegoing possible.
And for people that are heading to the theater, any tips on how to make sure that they're getting the best possible experience?
Yeah, so the first, which we've talked a little bit about, I mean, I obviously would push everybody to make sure that when you go to the movies, you actually go to a movie theater. I think we all can benefit from going from a communal theatrical experience, detaching from our day-to-day, and just enjoying these films in as unencumbered a way as possible. Sorry, I stole my words a bit there. The second thing is I would really push people towards pick your destination that offers the best sight, the best sound, the best environment for the best overall experience. For us, I would push people towards a Dolby Cinema. We have over 160 of them at AMC locations across the United States. But in case someone may not be able to get to a Dolby Cinema, you can still get an incredible audio experience at Dolby Atmos-enabled theaters across the country as well.
And for people that want to learn more before they buy a ticket, where should they go?
I would point everyone to dolby.com/cinema, where you can both find your nearest Dolby Cinema location and learn about all the ways to unlock a premium movie-going experience in Dolby.
Jed, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for Rise Unwind. I want to thank you for tuning in and checking out the show. Follow us on YouTube at Rise Unwind TV. And until next week, that was Rise and Unwind.